This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. And now let's begin today's discussion by talking about the latest trove of Pfizer documents that were just released by the FDA. Now, this was actually the second batch of documents that were released by the agency after a federal judge said that they could not take several decades to release them, and instead, he ordered that all of them must be released by the end of the year. Specifically, we're talking about the approximately 330,000 pages of data which Pfizer submitted to the FDA in order to get both emergency authorization and then later approval of their COVID vaccine. Now, if you take a look at the release schedule, you'll see that on March 1st, the FDA released about 10,000 pages of documents, which we already discussed in a previous episode. And then, 6 days ago, on April the 1st, the FDA released their second trove of documents spanning another 10,000 pages. And within this second trove, I believe that there are three things that are truly worth highlighting. The first is the bombshell development that was revealed in these documents that not only does natural immunity work well against COVID-19, but that both Pfizer as well as the FDA, they were well aware of this fact for a very long time. Specifically, the clinical trial data within these documents, it showed that those who had a previous COVID infection, meaning people who had natural antibodies within their system, they had no difference in outcome compared to those who were vaccinated in Pfizer's limited trial. Meaning that neither anyone who was vaccinated nor anyone who had a previous infection wound up developing severe disease as defined by either the FDA or the CDC. And just to make a quick note here, within the context of these documents, the CDC and the FDA define severe disease a little bit differently. The CDC defines it as anyone needing hospitalization, while the FDA defines it as anyone who winds up needing supplemental oxygen. However, the key takeaway here is that regardless of how you actually define the term, there were 0 cases of severe COVID infection among the naturally immune group, regardless of whether they were vaccinated or not. And then furthermore, the data also showed that natural immunity was statistically identical to the vaccine in terms of preventing infection. And so you see, what this means in practice is that if the FDA, as well as the CDC, did truly go through this data with a fine-tooth comb like they said that they did prior to granting authorization to the Pfizer vaccine, well then they should have really been well aware of the fact that natural immunity to COVID was effective. However, take a moment to look back on the messaging that America has received over the past 2 years. Government officials, as well as the media, they have essentially relegated natural immunity to the fringes of polite conversation. Talking about it, in fact, has become a borderline conspiracy theory to the point that social media platforms like Instagram have outright banned the use of the hashtag natural immunity. When you try to tag some kind of a picture or post with it, it doesn't even let you. And then furthermore, despite the data showing that natural immunity in and of itself is extremely effective at defending against both infection as well as severe case and hospitalizations, here's the conclusion that Pfizer actually released. Quote, final efficacy results show that the BNT162b2, which is the name of the Pfizer vaccine, provided protection against COVID-19 in participants with or without evidence of prior infection with SARS-CoV-2. Meaning that according to Pfizer, their vaccine works for people who both already have natural immunity and who don't have natural immunity. Which is ironically both technically true, but it's also misleading because it does not give you the full picture. Thankfully, though, we now have these documents in hand today rather than 70 years from now, so we can actually understand what took place behind the scenes. Also, just as a short aside, here's a short video of Dr. Fauci from a few years ago discussing what he believed was the most potent vaccine for the flu.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And so
if she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
Now, the second big takeaway from this new trove of documents is the revelation that adverse reactions to the vaccine were both more frequent as well as more severe in younger individuals, which is something, of course, that eventually was brought to light. However, these documents reveal the fact that researchers knew about this phenomenon long before the vaccine approval was granted. Specifically, in one of these documents, under a heading called Phase 1 Safety, it says this, quote, reactogenicity and adverse events were generally milder and less frequent in participants in the older group compared with the younger group, and overall tended to increase with increasing vaccine dosage. And just for your reference, when they say older group, that is technically defined, at least in this data set, as people above the age of 55. Whereas the entire study was looking at everyone above the age of 16, meaning two things actually. One is that this data does not actually include the effects of the vaccine for those under the age of 16, and that secondly, the researchers found that adverse reactions to the vaccine were more common, they occurred more frequently, and they were more severe in people under the age of 55. However, the study did not actually stratify the data more granularly, and so we don't know at which point it is most severe. Although data collected after the vaccine was approved shows a higher incidence of myocarditis for those below the age of 20. And then furthermore, these 10,000 pages of documents, they are a little bit scattered and out of order. And so one of these documents among the 10,000 pages is actually from a consent form for a children's clinical trial of the Pfizer vaccine. And this form is actually from December 15th of 2021, meaning this is just from 3 months ago. And on this form, there are several interesting points regarding adverse reactions. For instance, it lists several possible side effects that the child might experience during the trial, including myocarditis. Now, that is, of course, not in and of itself news. However, the document also states that the rate of occurrence for myocarditis is 10 out of 100,000 people. And in that document, they actually don't specify the age or gender of that rate of occurrence. And so the reason that's so significant is because previously the reported rate of myocarditis was 1 in 50,000 people, with a large chunk of that being cases among young males. However, in this legal consent form that Pfizer is having people sign before they actually enter the clinical trial, the number is significantly higher, being 10 in 10,000. Furthermore, this consent form also lists several other possible side effects, and here's what it says on this front, quote, "The effects of the COVID-19 vaccine on sperm, a pregnancy, a fetus, or a nursing child are not known." Which is, again, at least to me, just fascinating. Because when you compare what is actually written in this form, which is, again, just from 3 months ago, and you compare that to the media's narrative about how the vaccine is totally safe in regards to reproductive health, well, obviously there's a bit of a disconnect. Now, of course, I'm not saying that there's definitely a negative effect on fertility. However, Pfizer believed that, at least legally speaking, there was enough of a risk that they needed to write what they did in order to cover their bases. And the fact that they did, the fact that they wrote what they did, well, it shows that we just really do not know the long-term effects of the vaccine in regards to fertility, pregnancy, fetal health, as well as nursing a child, and so on. And that is, of course, despite the fact that you would be branded a conspiracy theorist if you ever dare to say that out loud on some of the legacy news outlets. The last point that I believe is really worth highlighting that came out of this 10,000 pages of documents. All right, just a super quick word from the sponsor of today's video. Imagine this. It's 2027. The price of a loaf of bread is $15. The price of a gallon of milk is $35. Our kids are having to learn Chinese. And worst of all, this right here is your food pantry. Take a look. It is empty, which is unfortunate because you didn't prepare while you still had the chance. So I would highly recommend that today you head on over to preparewithroman.com and stock up on the essentials from my Patriot Supply. So head on over to preparewithroman.com and save $150 off of my Patriot Supply's 3-month emergency food supply. Their food kits are awesome. They give you breakfasts, lunches, dinners, drinks, as well as snacks for 4 solid weeks, which will give you all of the essential calories that you need when you need it the most. Now, My Patriot Supply is America's largest preparedness company. They've quite literally served millions of customers. And best of all, their products are in stock, they ship quickly, and they ship discreetly directly to your doorstep, so your neighbors and your friends do not need to know that you are prepping. So head on over to preparewithroman.com and save $150 off of each 3-month food kit that you purchase. And when you buy today, it'll arrive quickly and discreetly directly to your doorstep. Again, that's preparewithroman.com. Prepare today for what's coming tomorrow. And now let's head on back to the studio. The last point that I believe is really worth highlighting that came out of this 10,000 pages of documents, well, it has to do with a concept called ADE, which stands for Antibody Dependent Enhancement Response. This is specifically when an individual takes a vaccine and ends up developing a worse illness than they would have otherwise normally experienced without the vaccine. Now, just like everything else that we've covered in these documents, this was also once branded and demonized as a conspiracy theory. However, within the consent form of one of the clinical trials, well, here's what Pfizer wrote, quote, "Although not seen to date, it cannot yet be ruled out that the study vaccine could make a later COVID illness more severe." So again, that does not mean that this is necessarily the case, but at the very least, legally speaking, Pfizer believed that in order to cover all their liabilities, they had to make mention of it on their consent form, which is not something that they would have done if the chance of an ADE response was 0. Now, of course, there's a lot more to these 10,000 pages of documents, and if you want to comb through them for yourself, well, I will throw a link to the PDF version of all the documents. They'll be down there in the description box below this video for you to check out, and all I ask in return is that you take a super quick moment to smash that like button, which will share this video out to ever more people via the YouTube algorithm, and also, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. That way, if you enjoy content like this, you can get it delivered directly into your YouTube feed every single weekday. And now, since we're discussing documents which had to be fought over in court for several months in order to be finally released so that you and I can get access to them, I thought it would be a great opportunity to sit down and speak with Mr. Tom Fitton, who is the president of a government watchdog group called Judicial Watch, and they regularly file Freedom of Information Act requests, and they sue the federal government in order to obtain documents just like the ones we discussed so that we can actually know what is happening behind the scenes in government. In fact, just earlier today, due to their work, the NIH finally released a brief showing what exactly Dr. Fauci's job description is. However, within that brief, they actually withheld all of their related contracts. Furthermore, they're actually in the process of suing a little-known organization. I've actually never heard of it before. It's called BARDA. It stands for the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. It's actually underneath the NIH, and they're suing them in order to get all the data regarding the COVID-19 boosters. So they are doing a lot of heavy lifting. You can find it over on Epic TV, which is our awesome no-censorship video platform. Just head on over to Epic TV, look for Facts Matter, and click on today's episode. It'll be the same thumbnail as it is here on YouTube. However, during the second half, instead of me explaining where it'll instead be the interview. And the reason we're doing it is because, frankly, YouTube is, it's a great platform to reach a lot of people, but frankly, the censorship on here is tremendous, and we're always walking on thin ice. We're walking a fine line because at any moment, some of the censors, whoever it is, a 20-year-old latte-sipping young kid in Silicon Valley, could say, hey, you know what? I don't like this episode. I don't like the facts that are being presented. It goes against the narrative. I'm going to take down not only this episode, but the entire channel. And then suddenly you will not be able to find this ever, and you will be deprived of the facts. However, over on Epic TV, we're building out a platform that is resilient to this type of censorship so that no matter what happens here on YouTube or on Twitter or with Google or any of these other platforms, well, you will always have access to our journalism. So head on over there, check out the interview with Tom Fitton as well as all the other phenomenal content. I'll throw a link to Epic TV. It'll be right there at the very top of the description box. And I hope you check it out. I hope you join us on this journey of exploring this beautiful world through honest journalism that's based in truth and tradition. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. Stay informed and stay free.